What is Medicaid? Essentially, Medicaid is going to be an income and asset-based program, and I want to distinguish that from Medicare. Medicare is like an insurance program. You automatically get it when you're 65, and it covers essentially skilled care. In the nursing home, it'll pay for rehab up to 100 days. You're not guaranteed 100, because again, that's something that people think if they go in, oh, I automatically going to get 100 days, no problem. You might get 5 weeks, because if they don't think you're going to improve by additional therapy, you can be cut off of Medicare. Then you go to custodial care if you have to stay there, and that is not covered by Medicare. Your supplemental policy kicks in after the 21st day, and then will run with Medicare up to 100 days. So again, it is not a solution for long-term care. It's an insurance program, takes care of if you're injured. Well, what about Medicaid? Medicaid for a single person, asset limitations $1,500, and there are some exemptions. The first exemption would be the house. The house is exempt for 13 months, but after 13 months you have to list it for sale. When the sale proceeds come in, then you'll be kicked off of Medicaid. A car, you're allowed to have up to $4,500 of equity if you're a single person. Not really going to be very useful. If you're in the nursing home, you might as well sell the car. Prepaid funeral. Now, you can do the funeral for the person in the institution, but again, what you may not know is you're also allowed to do certain burial expenses for the children. You can buy a casket or a vault for the children in addition to the institutionalized person. So again, there's some expansions of these exemptions that can be utilized in order to be able to qualify for these programs. Life insurance, you're allowed to have $1,500 of face amount. So that means if you have two $1,000 policies, you're tilt, because it's cumulative. So you can only have one policy up to $1,500. You can have one policy at $1,000, but you couldn't have two $1,000 policy. Household goods are really not going to be an issue because their value, essentially, if they're a few years old, is going to be negligible. And they count basically everything else. So how can you get to Medicaid? If you have the long-term care insurance program, you now can get to Medicaid. You might be able to keep as much as $500,000. So again, whatever amount that you buy in long-term care, you'd want to match to basically your other assets. How are we going to help John Jones? Well, if John Jones had $100,000 worth of long-term care insurance, after that policy pays out, which would be about a year and a half, he gets Medicaid the rest of his life, and he gets to keep his $100,000 of cash assets. So he's preserved his legacy to his children. Now again, this is a brand new program in Ohio. It's been here maybe a year and a half. And if you have long-term care insurance already, you have to now go back to the carrier and make sure that it's compliant with the partnership alliance policy. Because there are certain components that have to be there in order to be able to get the partnership alliance. Well, how about Medicaid for a couple? Medicaid for a couple is a little bit different. What they do is they look at a snapshot after a 30-day stay in the combination of the hospital and nursing home. After that 30 days, they take a snapshot back to that first day. How much did you have in total assets? And then the spouse in the community is allowed to keep half, but that half can't exceed $109,000. So in other words, if you had $300,000 in assets, the community spouse is only allowed to keep $109,000, so you'd have about $200,000 to spend down. In this case, this couple had $180,000. If we look at the half would be $90,000. That's less than $109,000, and so you're allowed to keep the $90,000. But you would have to spend the other $90,000. And where would you spend it? Well, you can elect to go ahead and spend it at the nursing home, or we can go back and we can expand some of those exemptions. The difference for the spouse is the car is exempt totally. The house is exempt as long as the community spouse continues to reside there. And again, you can do those burial expenses. So what you do in a spousal case is you look at those exemptions so you can spend down, not necessarily with just the nursing home. And again, if you had that long-term care policy, you'd be able to protect all of those assets if you had a $100,000 policy. So they still let you take advantage of the split and then still save on top of that. So it doesn't alter necessarily how Medicaid would normally work. It actually is a bonus to you then, depending on what your asset value is. Now, Medicaid planning used to be a little bit more straightforward. The rules were a little simpler, and along came the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005. And that was passed February 8th of 2006. What it did is essentially limited the gifting. It changed the look-back period from 3 years to 5 years. And I know the million-dollar question is, well, what if I did transactions before the date of the law change? Well, those are grandfathered under the old rules. So many of you can just go. But they did grandfather those older gifts prior to February 8th, 2006, under the old rules. It changed how we're going to interpret the use of annuities. Annuities are a very difficult topic to talk about even in a workshop like this because it's constantly changing. And they put home equity limits, and that's $500,000. And you may think, well, wow, that's never going to apply to me, except if you lived on a farm in Hinckley, because I did the case this morning, and unfortunately that was a problem because the home equity limits can't apply, in that kind of a situation.